Hey, what's up, team? So today we're going to be breaking down the latest patch notes and having a conversation about the latest update from the Throne of Liberty development team in the Tico Talks video, where we have a look into the team and how it's handling botting, scripting, and fair play enforcement. If you've been around the Throne of Liberty scene long enough, you know this is where things can get a little tricky, but it's nice to see the devs aren't shying away from talking about some of the harder topics here. So let's break it down. Starting with the broader philosophy the devs have laid out when addressing unfair play, they're going to be taking a multi-step approach, assessing the long and short-term impacts, evaluating how fast they can fix issues without destabilizing the game, and determining case-by-case disciplinary action. So this matters in a game that blends PvE progression to PvP power and competitive leaderboards. Missteps in fairness enforcement can permanently damage trust. Now, I don't necessarily agree with all of the fair play approaches they're going to be having in place here, and I feel like it's more of a slap on the wrist than anything else, but I guess we'll have to see more long-term how these are going to impact the game. So let's move on to the dimensional trial exploiting. This has been one of the more intense pressure points when it comes to exploits, where if you were exploiting the trials, you were able to gain a huge amount of power in runes. And now we're seeing a little bit more consequences for the abusers. Essentially, players were taking up positions where they could hit the bosses without taking any damage. And other than being some really cheesy gameplay, it's just outright exploitation. The players that did the exploiting received some pretty high tier rewards that they didn't earn, which undermines anyone who grinded to the top legitimately, or farmed out all their level 80 runes. And here's a breakdown of how they're going to be handling it. So everyone who didn't exploit will be getting 600 precious rune chests as compensation, and anyone who did exploit will be getting a warning on their account, as well as lose access to end of season rewards and receive a permanent mark on their account. So that last part is pretty significant. Permanent markings on your account is definitely something to not be happy about, because continued action that breaks the terms of service will ultimately flag your account further, which would probably result in a ban, I would imagine. So this is a pretty good step in the right direction, although the exploiters really didn't receive too much punishment here, I'll be honest, and it seems like they get to have their cake and eat it too. Hopefully these account marks will deter a lot of people from exploiting in the future. They also addressed a more minor issue where fewer than 100 accidentally got about 20 extra matchmaking boxes. Since this was unintentional and didn't result in abuse, there are no punishments going out here. And yeah, sometimes bugs are just bugs. Let's move on to some of the part-time botting statements. So here's where we get into a bit of murky territory with these part-time botters. These are players who mostly play legitimately but run bots or macros while AFK to grind materials or progress faster. And there's a bit of a gray zone here, where some people don't really see what they're doing is wrong, and they justify it as just catching up or saving time or skipping the grind. But they've made it very clear here that this is unsupported behavior. It's now resulting in 3-day suspensions, end of season disqualifications, and permanent account flags. Honestly, again, it seems like they kind of got away with it. Most people would gladly take a 3-day ban for what they got in return, which was largely the Black Iron Anvil weapons, which require a pretty hefty grind to acquire, legitimately. But again, I guess we'll just have to wait and see how they're going to be dealing with issues like this in the future. Hopefully this account flagging system really deters a lot of people, because you're essentially risking your account now, which honestly it should have been that way from the beginning, but what's done is done. Now let's move on to some of the PvP cheats or scripting. Now, PvP cheating is kind of a whole different beast, and the developers and Amazon Game Studios, the publishers, are definitely aware of third-party tools circulating and are choosing to proceed cautiously due to false positives in PvP, especially in games like this where the network desyncs and combat pacing can be inconsistent. It can definitely ruin legit players' reputations or drive someone out of the game altogether. So it seems like there's going to be ongoing investigation, and once they're confident, punishments will range from warnings to permanent bans, depending on severity. And honestly, I don't really know what they can do in this regard, because of how the blocking is so ingrained into the game's core. I feel like to completely remove the auto-blocking and scripting, the game would have to undergo some sort of fundamental change in how blocking works. But moving on, we have a clarification to the extreme exploiting of arc boss weapons. So one of the more severe cases was that they mentioned 2 players specifically in the EU region used an extreme edge case bug to craft 9 Archboss weapons, which is far lower than I assumed that would be abusing an exploit like this. But I mean, we don't have the data, so we're just going to have to go off what they're telling us here. This is definitely an exploit that could have wrecked the game's economy if it was left unchecked. Apparently both players were permanently banned and the items were removed, and the devs confirmed that the issue has been patched and all other Archboss weapons in circulation have been reviewed and deemed legitimate. We can only go off what they've told us here, but hopefully this is true and it was only the 2 players. On to performance and tier 2 progression, where they've said performance-wise Talandre's release has been a bit rocky, where everyone's been reporting more FPS drops and more desync issues. They said they're aware of this and are pushing optimization through regular maintenance, but I wish this was more of a focus from the beginning. As for tier 2 progression, they've acknowledged that it's a bit more demanding than intended. Where some of the more hardcore players might be doing okay, the average players are definitely struggling. They did mention next week we're going to be getting another video by Godspeed to go over some of the things in May and beyond that might help ease that burden. So that pretty much covers everything in the Tico Talks video, and it's nice to finally hear a clear message from the game's publisher and their message on fair play. It does seem like they're at least serious about trying to build a fair and competitive game, but more importantly, they're willing to open up and talk about the issues, which definitely matters to me the most rather than sweeping it under the rug and pretending nothing's happening in the background. It's nice to see them have some acknowledgement, even though I'm not entirely happy with how punishment's being dealt out. This is still definitely a good sign in my opinion. So now we're going to be moving on to the patch notes for update 2.70. So let's break it down. Downtime will begin at 10:30 p.m. PT, 5:30 a.m. UTC on April 23rd, and last about 8 hours. And they have said downtime may end significantly earlier, based on additional maintenance tasks that were completed. So starting with the Loot Goblin Festival event, these Golden Goblins and Golden Goblin Chiefs will spawn randomly throughout the world, including recently added Talandre zones, where the Chiefs are going to have more Solent drops. A system message will appear when the Goblin spawns, so keep an eye out for those. Apparently it's every 3 hours. And hunting the Goblins will reward titles, morphs, adventure coins, loyalty, runes, artifacts, and growth stones, as well as Solent, and the occasional tier 2 Nebula item drop. So definitely keep your eye out for this event. If the drops are much better than what we've seen so far in tier 2, this could be a great way to catch up or get some progression going for your character. Moving on to our general changes, where we have some UI position fixes, a text correction fix on the Grey Eyes Greatsword. We have a cooking fix here where they've put the honey apple back into the menu, so you should be able to craft that now. A controller bug fix causing pins to be removed when switching between mouse and keyboard. A couple item fixes, where the most notable one is the Cloak of Frozen Expanse, is now listed at the Armor Crafter. This is a pretty sought after cloak for DPS builds, so it's nice to see it getting added here. Some localization fixes, and some crash fixes. I don't know about you guys, but I've been crashing a lot more since Talandre hit. I remember back when the game launched in T1, one of the best and most notable things about Throne was the game's performance and optimization. And heading into T2, I definitely can't say those same things anymore. So hopefully we see more continued support for crash fixes and engine optimization in the future, as they've addressed in the latest Tico video. Another item fix for the Steel String Bow, and another performance fix where they fixed some client hitching in the Doomrock Grove dungeon. Now moving on to some pretty significant combat changes, where first up we have the daggers, where Cleaving Moonlight increased the cast distance to 4 meters, and Shadow Strike had a bug fix where the shadowy escape specialization was preventing you from moving back to your casting location. Moving on to Sword and Shield. Piercing Strike, they fixed an issue allowing Piercing Strike's cooldown to immediately reset each time it was used, where Counter Barrier and Jared's Precision were active. Moving on to Crossbow and Mother Nature's Protest. They've adjusted the description text to make it clear that the mana cost efficiency stat does not impact its usage mana cost. Another fix to Sword and Shield on Annihilation Blade, where they fixed an issue causing the Power Breach Mastery to not activate when Annihilation Blade was used. We have a pretty significant change to the Greatsword and its Cold Warrior passive, where they've adjusted the skill description to state hit chance in place of heavy attack, Now I definitely remember Cold Warrior not giving hit chance, but giving heavy attack. So this isn't just a skill description, this is a change that fundamentally updated how the passive works. I'm not sure if this is a buff or a nerf, because you're definitely sacrificing damage for more consistent hit, or vice versa. But yeah, I wish they would have stated that here because I think this was changed in a previous patch, but the description wasn't ever updated. Wand has had Warrior's Gambit adjusted to make the text more clear, and Daggers wear Camouflage Cloak. They've adjusted the skill description to make it clear that stealth is removed upon attacking another player, and not when being attacked. Pretty sure that was obvious, but it's nice to see they've added this in. So that pretty much covers everything from the latest Teakle Talks video and update 2.70. And I just want to reiterate that I do appreciate the transparency the devs have on fair play and competitiveness, and more importantly, they're willing to talk about it openly. And that level of transparency does deserve some recognition for sure. As always, thanks for watching. Consider leaving a like or a sub as it really helps out the channel, and I'll catch you in the next one.